Well, if I can do it, you can do it.
It says we're live. Let me
Yeah,
see if
we're
oh,
live.
yep, we're live. We're live on YouTube. Okay. Well, how are you doing, Sherry?
I'm doing good. I'm
Good.
spinning wool for a sweater for myself.
That's awesome. I saw the bunny
Yeah.
you made. You posted pictures of that. That was cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one of the things, yeah, I just had some time today. Hey, Luke Thompson needs to find a way to get in here because I'm going to
Hey,
be
Luke, come on.
reading some things out of
Lukey.
we're reading some things out of Oliver Clement's The Roots of Christian Mysticism, and he has a chapter
You're
called God Hidden and Universal. And Luke, here's one of these quotes. You're going to love this. I'll get to it. But it
well.
talks about
Wait a second, Lance. I just wanted to tell Luke that his ears must have been ringing because we were just talking about you before we started saying you would love this. So if you can join, it would be great.
since you'll be talking about Christian mysticism, so it's not like you're breaking your electronic fast on Sunday, Luke. I give you permission. All right. Well, let me just.
Motherland.
You want me just to start reading here, Sherry?
Sure.
All right. So this is from The Roots of Christian Mysticism, second edition. Text from the patristic era with commentary from, I call it Oliver Clement. I'm sure that's wrong. It's probably Olivier Clement or something like that. I bet it would be more
I think
closer
it's
to it.
Olivia. Yeah.
Yeah. History, including the history of Christianity, is littered with caricatures of God. Like so many mental idols, which have led people either to cruelty or to atheism. But how in modern times, after the growth of liberty and the critical spirit, could people have accepted a God who seemed to them worse than themselves, or at least inferior to the highest demands of a conscience secretly nourished by the gospel? People never cease to project onto God their individual and collective obsessions so that they can appropriate and make use of him. But they ought to understand that God cannot be apprehended from without, as if he were an object, for with him there is no outside, nor can the Creator be set side by side with the creature. In him we live and move and have our being. Acts 17:28, as St. Paul said to the Athenians. But enclosed as we are within ourselves and also enclosed in his hand, we can know him only if he freely establishes with us a relationship in which distance and nearness are made the setting for a word of someone speaking to someone. And here's a quote from Clement of Alexandria. Most people are enclosed in their mortal bodies like a snail in its shell, curled up in their obsessions after the manner of hedgehogs. They form their notion of God's blessedness, taking themselves for a model. And here's a quote from Theophilus of Antioch. Seeds in a pomegranate cannot see objects outside its rind because they are inside. Similarly, human beings who are enclosed with all creation in the hand of God cannot see God. Friend, it is through him that you are speaking. It is he whom you breathe. And you do not know it, for your eye is blind, your heart is hardened. But if you wish, you can be cured. Entrust yourself to the doctor, and he will open the eyes of your soul and your heart. Who is the doctor? God, using his word and his wisdom. Now we're back from the quotes. Nor is God an object of knowledge. Concepts, which never come without a secret wish to classify and to possess, are powerless to grasp the one by whom we ought to let ourselves be grasped. Grasped in two senses, of being opened to receive him as he freely reveals himself, and of being seized with wonder. A quote from Gregory of Nyssa. Every concept formed by the intellect in an attempt to comprehend and circumscribe the divine nature can succeed only in fashioning an idol, not in making God known. A quote from Maximus the Confessor. Only wonder can comprehend his incomprehensible power. I'll stop there.
Oh, he's on vacation.
Upcycle Club. Oh, Upcycle. Hey, what's up, Upcycle? Yeah, when I read this paragraph here, Sherry, this whole grasping, like, nor is God an object of knowledge, concepts which never come without a secret wish to classify and to possess, are powerless to grasp the one by whom we ought to let ourselves be grasped. Grasped in two senses, of being open to receive him as he freely reveals himself, and of being seized with wonder. You talk a lot about that. I'll be quiet. I knew that. When I read that paragraph, I thought of you.
Well, like they don't want you to grasp God, right? All these quotes, Maximus and Saint Gregory of Nyssa and whoever else there, Clement of Alexandria, I think he said. They want you to be seized by wonder, and so I'm just asking myself, well, what is that? What is wonder? We talk about it in the sense of awe, right?
Right.
But there's something very akin to the imagination, at least George MacDonald's definition of the imagination, because it seems to be, it seems that you end up with a divine connection. Like I've always thought about awe as that, what do you call it, that thing that Jordan Peterson talks about when he talks about awe. He talks about piloerection and how it's something that happens to you, right? Like it's not something you can conjure up. You can't make your hair stand on end. You can't make yourself get goosebumps, kind of thing. So I've always, to me, when I think about that, it's like something comes down, right? Something seizes you, and so there's a connection made there. And just because I'm working through that imagination essay, I'm just thinking about the way that George MacDonald defines the imagination as the place that we live and move and have our being, which you also quoted. Right? That we live and move and have our being in the imagination of God. And I mean, it's more than this, but it's also creation. Because the way that George MacDonald, and I don't want to sidetrack this into a George MacDonald conversation, but
no, let's go.
The way that he describes it is that all of the forms, anything that arouses our senses, right? So anything we can hear, see, taste, touch, smell, those things are created by God, and they already contain the meaning within them. So the meaning is there, and our imagination is the light that lights the lamp inside the form. So it illuminates the meaning that's already contained within the forms, right? So and this and he posits that this is where our language originates. Like we look around for some, a way to express ourselves, and we use a metaphor, right, of something that's already there. And so, what am I trying to say here? Just the language that you were using in that reading, or that they were using, it's all conducive of the imagination. It's something that seizes you. It has to do with wonder, right? It's an involuntary, in a sense. I mean, you have to The role I think that you have to play is attention. That's the energy that you expend in these situations. You have to pay attention. And when you give it your attention, then it can seize you, right? I don't know what you think of that.
No, it totally makes sense. And what I was thinking about, just as I was reflecting on when I was reading this myself, is how much time I've spent pursuing and seeking God in certain aspects to try and grasp knowledge, right? And like, so this really hit me,
Right.
like, nor is God an object of knowledge, because so much of, I've spent hours and hours and hours in study, and I approached it like I would approach law school or anything else, right? Like I was, but that's kind of
Well,
how I was trained, versus
so here's
contemplation.
do you think that what's missing in knowledge is meaning? Because knowledge doesn't, like this is what science says about itself, right? Science cannot give you meaning to your life, right? So you can acquire knowledge, but knowledge doesn't actually contain meaning. And I think that we experience that kind of wonder that they talk about there when we see the meaning,
Yeah. I think so. If I would look at how
right?
that would play out for me, like you had mentioned, awe or wonder, like those things happen to us. Like we get goosebumps, we're moved
Yeah.
to tears, like those sorts of things just happen to us, right? And the good thing is that in the midst of my pursuit in study, God would break through that and sometimes give me awe moments while I was in the midst
Yeah.
of that study, right?
Yeah.
That he would, but I definitely was trying to grasp grasp things so then I could go out and teach and tell others about it. So, but that's part of kind of what my nature was. But I would just say I noticed in myself, I had certain aspects of trying to academically study scripture or academically study. And that, I'm not saying that that's all in all bad, right? But what was my motive or my intent? I think I had many motives intent. I really was seeking after God, right? And so that was a good thing.
Yeah.
And God used all that, and it's
Yeah.
not bad. But in some ways, my end goal was to think that I could demystify the mystery, if that makes sense. And it gets into this trying to grasp something that I could hold on to, like, okay, this is this thing that I can, and he's going to get into affirmation and negation or so on and so forth. But I definitely was trying to find, okay, here's going to be this answer I'm going to have. And then I'm going to run
Yeah.
out and tell you this
You
answer.
have, right. I have it like it's going into my arsenal, right?
Yeah.
It's
With a
like I
good
have
intention.
bullets, I have arrows, and I have answers.
Yeah. And it wasn't a bad intention. I was
Yeah.
sincere and earnest, and it
No.
also, I mean, I'm not saying that any of that was, because all of that time spent in that, really, it's kind of Bishop
Well, you
Maximus
should have an
and
answer though, too, right? Like,
what, yeah, I think the difference is, and I think I've really enjoyed the Bishop Maximus and John Vervaeke conversations. And in one of those videos, one of the
yeah.
things that I really liked is he talked about the phronema, maybe of what East Orthodoxy was, but it's the sense of it's more procedural and perspectival. It's trying to point you in a direction, right? Versus, I would say, in certain aspects of my pursuits, I was pursuing more of a propositional. It was more headed towards a propositional frame. Now, I would also say that I also was very charismatic and Holy Spirit and kind of believed in the woo, and participated in the woo. And also, if you would look at like what people in 12 step, they're God of their own understanding, where they're just seeking after, so there were aspects
Yeah.
of me. So Luke would call me, I was a divided man.
Yeah. Lance, I'm just thinking, can you put the link in the chat? I don't think you did.
Oh,
Eh?
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
If anybody join us.
Let's go. Invite, copy. See, I'm an amateur. I think that's it. Come in.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me read a little bit more because we're going to get into some really good stuff here. So, okay. So we've got that. The true way to approach the mystery is in the first place celebration. Celebration by the whole cosmos. According to the fathers, the fall impaired the capacity of creatures to see the divine light, but did not destroy it. The universal aspirations towards God has, it is true, become a groaning, a sigh of creation, but it is still prayer, which is the essential activity of all created things. Everything that exists prays to thee. The inexhaustible nature of transcendence is expressed in the profusion of creatures. The universe is the first Bible. Each being manifests the creative word, which gives it its identity and attracts it. Each being manifests a dynamic idea, something willed by God. Ultimately, each thing is a created name of him who cannot be named. I'll read this poem from Gregory of Nazianzen. O thou who art beyond all, how canst thou be called by another name? What hymn can sing of thee? No name describes thee. What mind can grasp thee? No intellect conceives thee. Thou only art inexpressible. All that is spoken comes forth from thee. Thou art unknowable. All that is thought comes forth from thee. All creatures praise thee, those that speak and those that are dumb. All creatures bow down before thee, those that can think and those that have no power of thought. The universal longing, the groaning of creation tends towards thee. Everything that exists prays to thee, and to thee every creature that can read thy universe sends up a hymn of silence. In thee alone all things dwell. With a single impulse, all things find their goal in thee. Thou art the purpose of every creature. Thou art unique. Thou art each one and art not any. Thou art not a single creature, nor art thou the sum of creatures. All names are thine. How shall I address thee? Who alone cannot be named? Have mercy, O thou, the beyond all. How canst thou be called by any other name? From all eternity, God lives and reigns in glory. Each ray of that glory is a divine name, and these names are innumerable. Gregory Nazianzen, who wrote an admirable treatise, The Divine Names, lists some of them taken from the Bible and the Gospels. The fathers also identify them with the powers or the energies that spring from the unapproachable nature of God. At the moment of creation, it is this glory, the Shabbat of the Bible, which completes the things created, giving them at once their density and their transparency. The energies then become so many modes of the divine presence, the word, the logos, that establishes each creature, enables it to share these energies, or, in the case of human beings, invites them to share them. Thus, every creature names or ought to name in its own peculiar fashion the divine names. In spite of sin, which means exile from the glory, the world is still the vast theophany,
Okay, wait.
honored,
Can you hang on
honored
a
by
sec
the.
there, Lance?
Yep, I'm going to stop right here. This is
So,
the last. Yep,
yeah. Honored by what?
honored by the religions of antiquity. That's the end of the paragraph, and I was going to stop.
I think we Okay, sorry. I just had. I mean, I wanted to say something when you were reading that Nancy Anson poem, um, because this has to do with our Grail country on Friday, I think it was, when Nate and Jacob and Tyler, for that matter, and Guy had a disagreement about God being love, right? So Jacob said, God is love, but love is not God. And that's kind of been running around in my head. And I thought, oh, it has to do with the naming of things, because the naming of things is the apprehension of them, right? It's the having mode. It's the fully grasping something. And so if you name something, then it no longer ceases to amaze you, actually, because it's now been named. It's like, oh, okay, I know how that works, right? And anyway, I was just thinking about that, because there's something really right in what Jacob said when he said, God is love, but love is not God. And when he said God has to be at the top of the hierarchy, I think what he's saying is the unnameable has to remain unnamed, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna get into this. And so when we'll read here a little bit further, and he's gonna get into that, which is
Okay.
Well, it's going to be kind of one of Luke's things. You can be right or you can be right and be wrong, and wrong and be right. And in some ways, Jacob is right. In some ways,
Yeah.
Nate's right, right? Because
Of
he
course.
has many names. So he's going to get in and talk about there's all these names, right? And by the way, you see this a lot in Orthodox chants, which I love. Like if you'll read the matins or the different types of services throughout the day, and then some of that variable stuff shows up in divine liturgy. But there are all these names for, so he'll get into it. He'll talk about
treasury of blessing, giver of life, lover of mankind.
Yep.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, so he's talking about the divine names. So thus, theologians praise the divine capital O origin for having no name and yet possessing all names. For not having any name, because as they recall, the deity himself. This is from Dionysius the I always get this Areopagite. For not having any name, because as they recall, the deity himself, in one of the mystical visions in which he is symbolically revealed, reproved the man who asked, "Tell, I pray, your name," Genesis 32:29. And to avert him from any knowledge that could be expressed in a name, said, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" Judges 13:18. And is it not indeed wonderful, this name which surpasses every name, this nameless name that is above every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in that which is to come, Ephesians 1:21. And they praise him for having many names. When they see that he says of himself, "I am who I am," Exodus 3:14, or again, life, light, God, truth, all capitals. And when those who know God honor the universal cause, capital C, there's another name, with various names inspired by his effects, such as these, capital G, goodness, beauty, wisdom, giver of life, intelligence, ancient of days, eternal youth, salvation, justice, sanctification, mercy, liberation, as surpassing all grandeur and manifesting himself to humanity in a gentle breeze. They declare, moreover, that this divine capital O origin is simultaneously at the heart of the universe and far beyond the sky, sun, stars, fire, water, wind, dew, clock, rock, stone, and a word, all that is and nothing that is. So this cause of everything,
Mhm.
which surpasses everything, is at the same time namelessness, which befits him and all the names of all the creatures. He contains in himself from the beginning all creatures in such a way that he can be honored and named in terms of every creature. So I was thinking about Jacob when he says just taking him down merely to love, right? Is that you can't just whittle him down purely just to love, right? That it's more than that. Yet, as you can see also through this, is that you can also call him love. It's a both and.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It's more than both.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It's
a
more than
variant of
both.
things and yeah, that's why that was because when I heard Jacob say it, it was intuitively right to me, and but I hadn't given it a lot of thought, and I mean it's just as wrong to say that you can't say God is love because God is justice. I mean that that's just not understanding what love is, but but it's not so much what you think God is. It's the whole act of apprehension, right? Of naming and grasping. I was also thinking about what happens when when you like we have ways of talking about names too. Like we say, oh, he's made a real name for himself, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to completely destroy their name. Nobody will ever want to, like
Yeah.
the
Not many
guy,
kids named
the guy with
Hitler
the little
anymore.
mustache, the guy with the little mustache who remains unnamed.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's naming their children that anymore, right? Kind of thing.
Right.
And so, like in both of those scenarios, there seems to be a kind of once something's been named, you think, like, this gets back to what I was trying to say before. You think that you know everything about it already, right? I mean, I'm sure that there's depths to people that are not contained in their name, even the name they've made for themselves, right?
Right.
And the name that we choose to destroy is not even really their name either, right? But we can ruin a person by ruining their name.
Well, and the interesting, I was thinking,
Because, wait, I just want to say this one last thing. Because we can dismiss them, right? Because we hear the name and then we just, that's happening in the culture war, right? Where you call either people, the N word or something else on the left, whatever you call them, I don't know. And with that, you don't have to engage with the person. You can just dismiss them because you've named it, right? And now you know everything about it.
and you collapse them into this thing.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm going to collapse you into this meaning, this thing, and I'm going to brand you with that, right?
Right, which is an objectification, right? Essentially.
Right. Right. I also think one of the interesting things, it says we're going to get new names, Sherry.
I know. Can't wait.
Wow, man, what that's it.
My question is, will I like it? No, apparently
Yeah,
I will.
you will love it. Yeah.
Apparently I will.
Well, and so you guys have been, so this gets into, like, and Jess was talking about it, like it's so much about this, and yet there's this act of naming, right? We see it right out of the gate in Genesis. And
Yeah, because this is the essentialness. What's that word I'm looking for? Of the particular. Like we need the particular in order to, as McDonald would say, clothe our thoughts. Right? We have to
right.
name things, and otherwise we would just open our mouths and nothing would come out.
Right. And so much as this is getting into the one and the many, right? Because it's
Of
saying
course.
he's in the one, he's in every creature, and
Yeah.
yet he's above and beyond everything. Like it even, I think it gets into a little bit. It says like infinity doesn't even contain him, which is what it doesn't, right? Like, so, I used to maybe have some concepts that God was infinity. No, he's like, he's beyond infinity, whatever that is, right? Which is, crazy. And then it goes on. So this is interesting because I want to get to some stuff because it gets into some of this affirmation and negation stuff. And I don't want, by the way, I don't want to, I'm really trying to get past saying that people are wrong.
Good.
I've really started noticing that, and I watch people who are using that word, and Sherry, but this is okay. I'm going to use me language, right?
Yeah.
I've been so guilty of that my whole life.
Me too. Me too.
So guilty of it, and it has not worked out well in my relationships, and I still fight this to this day. And so, my poor wife has to struggle with with me. God bless her. But I'm trying, and God has really just started to bring up a lot of things. But two things have been happening to me, and it kind of gets into this whole mystery stuff that we're going to talk about is, there have been some conversations on the Voxer, and I've had these impulses to want to say something or maybe disclose something about maybe something I'm seeing. And this is new for me, which is like, God's like saying, why don't you just not participate in this?
Mhm.
Everyone doesn't need to have your thought on everything the moment you have it,
Yeah.
and I don't know that what I have to share is actually going to be beneficial to that person.
Right.
It may be, but that's like right time, right place,
Yeah.
right moment. And if God really wants me, and this, like I've had this before, if God really would want me to share something with someone, one, he would keep bothering me about it.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be able to get away from it. And two, he would provide the timing and the place. And if this is the wooey me, I wouldn't be able to not say it if it was something he wanted me, if it was something I needed to share with that person.
Right.
I think we like, well, God wants you to know this and God wants you to know that. And I've got this thing for you. Like
Oh.
I'm putting the mirror to myself. I'm not pointing a finger at anyone else. I am
Yeah.
so guilty of this.
Yeah.
And I think it's tied into this whole idea of this mystery stuff, right, Sherry? Because a lot of times when I'm trying to do that, it's like I'm almost treating them like an object too. Like they say, nor is God an object of knowledge. It's like I sense like I have some sort of knowledge or something, and then I'm going to impute that onto you as like as somehow I really know, right?
Yeah. How absurd, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the good thing about for me, which has happened, is I've had a lot of good practices in my life, whether it be 12-step stuff or things that I've done. I would say, and the reason what's driven me to books like this, but as I've entered into these practices with, prayer ropes and meditation and those things, is some of these deeper things are starting to get bubble up in me. And I was certainly aware of them at the time, but it's like, for the first time, I'm really seeing them clearly, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And it's ugly. I
Well,
don't,
it is.
I mean, grace towards myself, but no, it's like this sense of like, this is not lashing myself. And it's not a condemnation, but it's
No, it's a moment of illumination.
a showing me things like,
Mhm.
you don't want to be this. I
It's
know you don't want to be
It's
this.
shining a light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let me go on because there's some really good stuff here.
Sure.
A couple more pages. However, the world masks the mystery as much as it expresses it. A negative approach is therefore indispensable, one which sweeps away the idols of the mind, the systems, the intellectual concepts, along with the images of sense experience. In the first place, the mystery of being cannot be confounded with a being, even though it might be at the summit of the hierarchy of beings. The one, capital B, being is the cause of being, and so cannot be a being. that philosophical idol, the good Lord, capital GL, of a certain type of Christianity, or the supreme being of spiritualism, has brought about simultaneously the death of God and the loss of the mystery of being. Let me read one more paragraph. The living one, however, is no more the unlimited being, the theotes, and it says the word theotes is here derived from the words thereini, to found, and therein, to leap beyond every limit, or divinity. The living one, however, is no more the unlimited being, the theotes or divinity of the Gnostics, than he is the supreme being of a closed monotheism. The life of the capital L living one that is expressed in the profusion of divine names and theophanies originates in the inexhaustible depths of personal capital L love. So the abyss is neither undifferentiated nor indifferent. From it we derive freedom and love, crucified and divinizing love. It is this supreme revelation, that of Christ, which we must understand from expressions suggesting both an unfathomable plenitude exceeding even our idea of God and our absorption in being. And perhaps contemporary atheism, to the extent that is not stupidity but a purifying revolt, could be understood in a new way as the path of unknowing that is not an intellectual path, for negation is denied just as much as affirmation, but is pure adoration.
Can you read those last couple sentences again?
Yeah. And then I want to go, I probably should have stopped at that first paragraph. And then I want to go back to that first paragraph and talk to you about imagination. So he's talking about atheism up here, right? So it's almost as if I think he's saying that what we've all noticed, that sometimes going out and becoming an atheist will be a good thing because you're rejecting some of these other poor ideas of concepts of God, right? So I'll write this.
Right.
So he's talking about, okay. From it, we derive freedom and love, crucified and divinizing love. It is the supreme revelation, that of Christ, which we must understand from expressions suggesting both an unfathomable plenitude exceeding even our idea of God and our absorption in being, and perhaps contemporary atheism, to the extent that it is not stupidity, but a purifying revolt, could be understood in a new way as the path of unknowing that is not an intellectual path, for negation is denied just as much as affirmation, but is pure adoration. And I'll go on and read a couple of these. Well, let me go back to this. So
Yeah.
So here's this thing. So, however, the world masks the mystery as much as it expresses it. A negative approach is therefore indispensable, one which sweeps away the idols of the mind, the systems, the intellectual concepts, along with the images of sense experience. In the first place, the mystery of being cannot be confounded with a being, even though it might be at the summit of the hierarchy of being. So when I was reading that, I was thinking about the things you're contemplating with imagination.
Yeah. Such as?
Well, understanding its importance, right? Because I think like we exist in the imagination of God. And I think, you're separating that from fantasy, right?
Yep.
And I also think where he's talking about here is we can't have the idols of our mind, because we can create the idol of God through the things we want it to be. And, we all create our own gods that basically allow us to do what we want ourselves to do.
Well, I think we create idols when we become immovable in our propositions, like, because that's when the idols turn to stone, right? This contraption is a spinning wheel. So, and it's when the idols turn, the idols being made of stone turn us into stone. And I mean, we've all seen that in action. We know what that looks like, right? So,
yeah, and I put it in a different sense. My idols paralyze me. They can paralyze me.
sure, it will paralyze you because you'll have arms, but you won't be able to embrace with them. You'll have legs, and you won't be able to move anywhere. You'll have eyes, and you won't be able to see. You'll
It
have
traps.
ears, and you won't be
Yeah.
able to hear.
Yep. It traps me in that idolistic frame, or my ideology. Let's just say the ideology of land.
This is exactly what. Yeah, this is exactly what you see in fairy tales, right? Like when, I mean, a good example is Narnia, when the Ice Queen turns, everyone into ice, right? Freezes them solid. But I had a thought about, well, see, when you say the word imagination, and I don't really want to change it because somehow I feel like I need to redeem it. I want to redeem the word. But people just right away they think of things, fantasy stories and superheroes and things that aren't quote unquote real, right? That they make up. But George MacDonald makes it very clear that we don't make up anything, and that everything that we use to describe the invisible, let's say, we take from the visible. We take from the particular, the thing that's already existing, right? The forms, which are nature themselves, and the meaning is in the forms. And so we're not really like I think the easiest way for me to keep track of my imagination is it working towards finding out the works of God, right? They should think of imagination as the thing they used to worry about.
Well, and I think so. We got all these different names that they were talking about, but no name contain it, but every name contains God, which is wild to think about.
It's in here explain. I think Grim should come in here and explain this.
There we go.
This statement.
Well, this is really simplistic, Sherry. This is like elementary school sort of thinking about things, but that's what I do. And this is where icons come in. Things that help you image the image. Like true imagination should, and we look at all these names we talked about with God, right? Origin, divine one, love, like beauty, goodness, all of these things, like the imagination that.
Hey, let me try this on you, for example. So you read earlier that every creature contains God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every creature.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want to use your imagination in a finding out the works of God, then you could ask yourself this question: what attribute of God am I looking at in this creature? What is this creature teaching me about God? Right? Because if God is in it, then it has then there's a meaning in that form, and that meaning, right, is already given. It's already given. So this is the way that I think we should be using our imagination. We should be attending, right, to the things that God has made and asking ourselves, what does it tell me about God, if God is there? Because to me, every living thing is an attribute of God, right? It's a name.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly, as we're walking through and we understand, he's like Jonathan Pajot, and in one of his clips or something, I think I saw it. I shared this with Chad because it was interesting, because he said, so a young man was asking him, is God just kind of a set of moral principles, or is he a person? And Jonathan Pajot said, well, first off, Christians understand, the first thing we have to understand is God is the ground of all being, because that's it, right? And then the second thing we have to understand is everything we say about God is wrong. which is very
Right.
Pageauian. But right, I do think like so.
Well,
What so?
I think
Go ahead.
if you think, well, I just think if you say that to yourself, it cultivates a humility, right? If you say everything I say about God is wrong, it's not wrong in the same sense that you were talking about earlier, where you said you don't want to tell someone they're wrong. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is that you're never going to get it right, right? You're never going to be on target. Hi, Grim.
Hey.
Let's bring Grim in on the
yeah.
imagination.
Well, there's two things. The comment I was called in to discuss was where Sherry was concerned how, like, when I say imagination, I need to redeem it because people start thinking fantasy and imaginary friends and other things, and to me, I was like, to refocus is that imagination is what you use to worry about tomorrow. Because like you were saying, as far as imagination should be used to ponder the actual workings of God, that's the reality we face every day. And when we're worrying about tomorrow, we're doing that. We're pondering the actual workings, but we're using our imagination and creating the scenarios and, role playing in our head what's going to happen when I talk to the boss tomorrow about the thing.
Well, I see. Here's the other thing about myself, Grim, is I actually have this crazy thing where I go back. I'm a Walter Mitty. I try and reimagine my past. Like if I'd only done this different or that different, and then I play out this whole different life there I'd be sitting in today, which is insanity. Like in 12-step work, we expose the insanity, and so I'm reimagining my past. So like I'm living in this different life, which doesn't exist today, right? Oh, if I only made this decision, or I wouldn't have done this. Mm-hmm. Or like you say, then I'm out here reimagining tomorrow a lot of things. And I found that it's been very hard for me to live in the moment of this day. The only thing that I ever lived where I was hyper-focused on today was when I needed to figure out, I never was without trying to figure out the substances I needed to use to get high. I would drive 3 hours and sit at a rest area waiting for someone to arrive for an hour and a half to focus on what I needed in the moment. So evidently I can do it with certain things, but I have a hell of a time doing it in my normal life.
I also wanted to point out that spot where you were highlighting the negative and the way the atheism scrapes away the fantasy that's not the misuses of the imagination, as it were, in this concept.
And the misuses of the concepts of God. They're rejecting they're rejecting the God you're telling him that God is, and rightly so.
I don't know why they're resting so hard on being can't be a person.
Can't be a person?
Yeah, it's like the foundation at the top there.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that it's beyond being. Yeah. Well, that's getting pretty deep. Like that's right into Heidegger now.
It's like
and I couldn't even begin to explicate that.
No, I mean I get that there's a case for that, but I don't know that it can't be a being. I mean I can see your argument that why it can't be, but it might be wrong, that argument. I get it, but
well, and I think what he was, if I remember what he's trying to get at, is that it's beyond being, but then he's also every being. So it's both.
Yeah. It's the one. It's the one in the. It's the one.
I didn't like it because, like, saying that it can't be a person might lead someone to think that they shouldn't interact with it personally, as if it were a person.
Oh,
that may be the most
it could be efficient
way of interacting with it. I don't know. So that was me explaining the
like
comment.
there's.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Are you leaving now?
Yeah,
Are you leaving
I'm
now?
just listening. I'm listening, but like if you want to draw me out, I'll come and say hi.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'll be in the crowd. But...
Okay. All right. See you. Now I forgot what I was going to say. I wanted to say something about that. Like, so the idea of beyond being is the one, and being in all beings is the many, right? And there's that's what I wanted to say. There's a concept in Judaism, and this is also what Jacob was getting at Friday, was that when we look in the face of the other, we see God. That's where we see God, right? Now, as a Christian, I have to right away, I go to Jesus saying, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. Okay? And that's a very Jewish idea. You see God in the face of the other, right? So if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. And I don't know if I have more to say on that, but those were some of the thoughts.
Yeah, and that's the sheep and the goats. When they say, well, when did we see you, Lord, when we did this? All, the sheep, they were righteous. And then the goats asked the same question. He said, when you did it to any of the least of these, you've done it to me, right? So it's that sense. He goes on to, I think, Grimm, I think, as we read on here, he's going to tackle what you're talking about there, this being stuff. And this is from, so we get in some quotes. To celebrate the negations, this is from Dionysius the
Areopagite.
Areopagite. I always want to say I want to say the G instead of the P first. Areopagite, got it. To celebrate the negations, in order to attain unveiled knowledge of this unknowing that is hidden in every being by the knowledge that can be had of it, in order to see this way that superessential obscurity that is hidden by all the light that is contained in beings. This is another one from Dionysius there, Areopagite. If it happens that in seeing God, one understands what is seen, that means it is not God himself who is seen, but one of those knowable things that owe their being to him. For in himself he transcends all intelligence and all essence. He exists in a superessential mode and is known beyond all understanding only insofar as he is utterly unknown and does not exist at all. And it is that perfect unknowing, taken in the best sense of the word, that constitutes the true knowing of him who transcends all knowing. This is from Maximus. The infinite is without doubt something of God, but not God himself, who is infinitely beyond even that. This is back to Clement. We therefore say that the universal cause, capital C, which is situated beyond the whole universe, is neither matter nor body, that it has neither figure nor form, nor quality nor mass, that it is not in any place, that it defies all apprehension by the senses, rising higher. We now say that this cause is neither soul nor intelligence, that it can be neither expressed nor conceived, that it has neither number nor order, nor greatness nor littleness, nor equality nor inequality, nor likeness nor unlikeness. It neither remains stationary nor moves, that it is neither power nor light, that it neither lives nor is life, that it is neither essence nor perpetuity nor time, that it cannot be grasped by the intellect, that it is neither science nor truth, nor sovereignty, nor wisdom, nor singularity, nor unity, nor divinity, nor goodness, neither spirit, nor sponsorship, not fatherhood, and on and on and on. That it eludes all reasoning, all nomenclature, all knowing, that it is neither darkness nor light, neither error nor truth, that absolutely nothing can be asserted of it, and absolutely nothing denied. That when we formulate affirmations or negations applying to realities that are inferior to it, we are not affirming or denying anything about the cause itself, because all affirmation remains on this side of the transcendence of him who is divested of everything and stands beyond everything. Now we go to another quote. The mystery that is beyond God himself, the ineffable, that gives its name to everything, is complete affirmation, complete negation, beyond all affirmation and all negation. If Luke were listening right now, he would be hollering amen. And I'll just say to this, the simultaneous negation of affirmation and negation means that God's transcendence eludes our very idea of transcendence. God transcends his own transcendence so that he might not be lost in abstract nothingness, but may give himself. The simultaneous overcoming of affirmation and negation already outlines the antinomy of personal existence. The more it is hidden, the more it is given. The more it is given, the more it is hidden. That is why the Father also speaks of God as fathers as inaccessible, of God beyond God, in terms of a springing forth, a creative and redemptive leap outside his essence, following the eternal movement of the divine energies, but also in order to communicate these to creatures by personal actions, because the living God is a God who acts. He is not being, but he contains it, and by his actions, he enables creatures to share in it.
Yeah, it's the reconciliation of all things. Just to say, right? Yeah, which is like it's the reconciliation of the antinomies, right? The opposites, and that's why you can't name it, because as soon as you name it, you exclude something else, right? That's what you do. As soon as you name it, you've excluded something else. And it contains everything. That's why I say it's the reconciliation of all things.
Yeah, that's why I have that overly simplistic thing that I was just thinking about when I was just thinking about the creative act. Is it's almost like we're on this one movement of a giant exhale of God and an inhalation where God will be all in all again, like it's this movement out to return.
Yeah. Groom says the arena is a giant love is as close as I like to get.
Well, and I think one of the things that I think comes through loud and clear what he's talking about this is that sense of when you see the other, you see God, right? So because he exists in all the beings, right? And then all those, what you could say, the energies we had all those names before that we were using about God, which all describe him, but none of which contain him, right? Which then comes back to that pushback that Jacob had, which is he just didn't want to limit God to define him as love, right?
Well, the thing is, if there's a reconciliation of opposites going on here, then I don't even want to say it, but
say it.
Well, absolutely. This is why you can't name it, because as soon as you name it, you exclude something. And I know I'll just throw this out there. Jacob always says, "Who put the snake in the garden?"
Exactly. And it's what you and Jess were getting through in Job, right?
Yeah.
Like, and rightly so. Like my wife, when you read that first point, when we highlighted and she really looked at, wait a minute, God pointed out Job? Like she had a response to that. Like, that sucks. I don't like that. Yeah. And by the way, that's a fair response, because you know who also had that response? Job.
Yeah. Like if I knew someone one time who went out with a guy who had a BB gun. Thank God it was only a BB gun, because there was potential for other things here. And she pointed at the person and he shot them on the street. Okay. And they were teenagers and they were laughing about it because it was, people were being shot and didn't know from where, whatever. so her pointing those people out, like, here's another example. I went to visit a neighbor once in Telegraph Creek, and she had to kill little kittens because she had too many of them, and there was no veterinarian for 1,000 kilometers. And so she asked me to choose the kittens that should die. I said, no, I'm not doing that. To me, that's like worse than killing them, So, and I'm saying this because God pointed Job out to Satan, okay? That's like me picking the kittens to kill, And I don't know if people actually, well, I'll tell you this. This is my experience. Either people understand what that means somehow intuitively. They can't maybe talk about it, but they understand it. And other people just reject it outright. Like there's just no middle ground when it comes to this, and it's very, very difficult to talk about because you can't call good evil and you can't call evil good. So you have to be careful, right? But anyway, back to the whole idea of naming. This is why I think this is also why Jacob doesn't want to, or puts it this way, that God is love, but love is not God. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really well put.
Right. Well, the Chris show is here. Yeah. Well, the Chris show is here. I'd like to have him jump in because he, had that little bit where he was like calling out evil and doing it poorly. Right.
Yeah.
And I've actually been watching Jacob and Nate a little bit on Twitter, and they kind of had some back and forth lately. And Jacob called Nate demonic, and I was like, come on, no, don't do that. But then Nate's on there calling Jordan Peterson evil. And so I'm just like, what I mean? So we're putting those names on the people. And so, but again, that's not I do all those same things, right? So we have these aspects where we see these certain things and, that kind of naming that happens. And then, so Chris brings this up, which is the transcendence of a transcendence is a little much, I feel like. And I think for us, like when you mentioned that, Chris, which is like, I'm a dumb guy. Like I was talking to my wife, like there's that thing that stands before, let's just say simple words, like before the Big Bang. Like what's the chicken and the egg? Like what's the thing before the thing beyond the thing that exists? And for us, I do think that's why I'm so grateful, at least for me as a Christian, I have that example, that particularity of Christ, right?
Yeah. So since duality fails you here, you have to get on another level. Andrew, I like a lot of your comments. You could jump in here, that would be great too. But what's the other level? What are we talking about?
I mean, like for my speaking against evil thing, it's not like it's not rooted in any type of like rational justification. Like it's more, the goal is more to appeal to the gut, to appeal to like, you can get it feels like there's a million arguments telling you to not see what's clearly there in front of your eyes. And we seem to think that we have to be able to explain why we feel what we feel in order for it to be justified. And like, I just don't think that's the case. And I think that if you think something is wrong, I think that that it's okay to speak out against it. I think that there's always the possibility of you being wrong. And there is also like that there's an element of that that's the what's the term that they use a lot? Opponent processing, right? It's like, how do you even opponent process without call it, like, if you're just looking at something you think is evil, you don't say anything, like, and like, but if you want to like even dumb down the term and say evil, you could use the word like wrong, like incorrect, like I think you should go left instead of right, like just simply incorrect. Like you can't opponent process without that data, and you know that data. And like I just don't, but I don't like. I think that as soon as you start intellectualizing good and evil too much, you find yourself in a ton of contradictions. You find yourself in a place where you can't really like, you're not going to be able to justify it. It's more of a thing you have to stand in faith on. Like, I believe this is wrong, and then you just say it's wrong.
Yeah, no, what I like what you did, Chris, is like you actually approached it through humility, and the humility was in the title, pointing out evil and doing it poorly. Like you weren't trying to say, hey, I've got all the answers. This is evil. This has to be this. Like you saw something and you were pointing to it and you were trying to talk about it. And you like to talk about you like to touch the third rail. Like you also like to talk about the things, you're kind of like Kanye. You like to talk about the things you're not supposed to talk about because you want to talk about them. Because how are we ever going to come to some if we don't opponent process? I think we have to talk about these things and we need to do that. But I think you approached it. I think you approached it with humility. That's what I liked about that series that you did.
Well, one thing that also like is refined in my mind recently on this topic is instead of like a dialectic between good and evil, a dialectic between strength and weakness, and understanding that weakness is inevitably evil and strength is inevitably good. But I think that if you put it in those terms, right? Like once again, like if you don't like the word evil, use the word incorrect. Use the word like, if you don't like the word sin, use the word like miss the mark. Like you're not going to hit your target with this strategy, right? This way of doing it is a weak way. If you build your house on this sand, it's not going to be as good as building this house on this rock. This rock is good, and this sand is, for all intents and purposes, evil. But like, it's more like if that's like more whatever, like better, but for people to understand. But like ultimately, like it's also like understanding that your own evil is directly related to your own capacity to be weak. And then like I think that frames things differently than like your capacity to be good. Like I don't know, like I feel like it changes the dialectic a little bit, where you're not caught between like, oh well, everyone's good and everyone's evil, and how do you even point to what's good and evil? It's like, well, you can point to what is strong, you can point to what is weak a lot easier, I feel like, and say like, you know, I was having this, not to rant too long, but actually to go in a second, so I'll do my rant and then I'll leave. I was talking to this pastor and we were talking about resting in God, and we were talking about like Joe Rogan talks about killing your inner bitch, and just like that voice of weakness within you that wants to quit. And we were talking about how like that's the same thing, like resting in God and killing that inner bitch is the same thing. And it, I don't know, there's something there where go ahead.
Don't you think that that's just simply my strength being made perfect in your weakness? Like my strength is made perfect in weakness, right?
Yeah. And it's also like what you do with your weakness, right? Because like if your weakness is like, oh, like I think what creates evil is weak men who instead of like trying to do right things, give up and then find themselves in the clutches of spirits bigger than them, right? Like I actually even think Christianity should market themselves as as like a noble, strong, the only noble, strong way, but also the hardest way, which is what makes you so strong, right? Like, and so like, yeah, if that's what you're saying, then I agree.
No, I
Well,
did. There are two things I'd want to point out that I saw you're doing there, Chris, which is one, I think one thing is pointing towards a thing is different. That like that's that perspectival and procedural sort of stuff, but like pointing towards a thing is good. And the other thing, like that, be still and know that I'm God. You know how hard it is to get to that place? I'm trying to do that.
Right.
It is so
Right.
hard for my butt to get up every day, do the disciplines and the routines, and then I got to take care of stuff in my personal life. Otherwise, I'm being haunted. My mind isn't quiet. Like you have to quote unquote kill your inner bitch to be able to sit down, be still, and know that you're God.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
It's hard. That's why young men are attracted. I'm just going to say the one thing that I just met another young man today. They're attracted to the difficulty, the fasting, the praying, the call to hard things is something. It's a call to adventure.
Totally. And then like it, and then within, I think it's within that place where like, where when you're talking about speaking against evil, you're going to find you can't speak against evil without a bit of like a irrational, without standing on like a ground that's a bit irrational and a bit unsure, because there is always that possibility that you're wrong, but that just requires a bravery, right? That just requires a faith, a courage, and you can have that courage if you have that strength, which like, yeah, like you're talking about, which like comes from that being still, comes from like summoning that energy, so to speak.
You know the best way to point out evil, I think, and Grim Grizz has this figured out. The reason why they had to shut down the memes is because memes expose at such a deep level the insanity of a thing. You're pointing it to your meme, whole meme culture. It goes back to the court jester, right? Like bringing, it's almost it takes the absurdity of it and it points it out in such a distilled way.
100%. Okay, I gotta go, but it's good to see you guys. Good to see you, Sherry.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, welcome, Andrew. You've been dropping in some awesome comments. Anything you'd want to jump in and talk about?
Yeah.
No, I think it was just really interesting. And I liked what Sherry said about, as soon as you name it, you're thrust into a whole world of like possibilities that you're kind of trapped in. And I just put that one comment that you're kind of blinded into, and almost like what Chris was saying, when you kind of step out sometimes and going against something, you also can kind of entrap yourself in that. But it's also the ability sometimes, I think a lot, like I was saying, to get away from the dualistic ability to do that. But when you have somebody who loves and cares for you, it's going to be able to make you move in those areas where you have the ability to fail and come back and see new positioning. So it's almost like love does it to us, that takes us into new ways of seeing. But
yeah, I'm just thinking about, because I was listening to Chris talking and I had this thought that, whenever you want to dig into this topic, you end up in duality, right? But if you pull back and think about the fact that God is reconciling all things to himself, for me, that reconciliation is the reconciliation of opposites. Literally, that's what it is. And so you're gonna and this is why, and then as soon as I had that thought, Chris said something like, but it's always going to be a little, difficult situation, because, and I'm thinking, because it's a paradox. That's why. Because you're standing in the middle of a paradox in love, right? Love is, I think, the vehicle with which we can enter into that reconciliation, right? And that paradox.
And would that be your ego can't stand that? Like your ego,
Right.
Now you're going into your situation. Now you are depending on the other in a way that is very scary for your ego, because we've all been hurt and traumatized, and that area is very uncomfortable. Even when you're making the right moves, it's still uncomfortable, but it's like you're dependent on the other in a way that, it almost seems. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually think that deep down inside, no matter, I've been married for 36 years to the same man, okay? And I know that he doesn't know me. I just know that, okay? And he probably never will, not in this life, like fully know me. And so I always have to sacrifice myself to that, to knowing that, okay, that no matter how long we're together and how much we tell each other, and that we, and Paul Vanderklee talks about this too. He says, he's always surprised by his wife, no matter how long they're married, right? She always says something or does something that surprises him. Why? Because he doesn't know her. One day you will know as you are known, right? And that's not now. And it doesn't matter how much you love somebody and they love you back, they still can't know you that way. So this is the sacrifice that you do, that you engage in, I think, in love, is that you know that, like you were talking about, you're always going to get hurt, right? Well, that's because the hurt comes when you realize that they don't really know me, right? That they misunderstood me. This me, this nebulous me that I don't even know, right? But that feels this pain because somebody doesn't know me, something like that. I don't know what you think of that. Anyway, that was just
no, and that makes sense. And I think, well, one of the things I added in the conversation of Friday, when I know what Jacob's bucking up against, but in some ways, though, when we look at, it's kenosis by kenosis, like what you saw, and it says that Christ was the exact representation of the Father, it was this sacrificial, self-emptying love, right? The kind of love that says we're worried about being vulnerable, Andrew, and being hurt. Well, while he's being nailed to the cross by humanity, it wasn't just the Jews, it was the Gentile, it was us. We were doing it. He's saying, Father, forgive them for they know. Father, forgive them for they know not what they do.
Yeah, and my point is that all love has to be sacrificial, because like any love that you engage in is sacrificial, because the person you are giving to, your kenosis, right? You're emptying yourself out to them, doesn't know you. And
right.
That's exactly
and you don't know
what
them.
Crucifixion
Yeah.
is.
It's all this mystery, right?
It's a man being poured out to people who do not know who he is.
And I think that's a great point that you're saying. Like it came up, you were quoting, was it Maximus the Confessor? That you did the long blurb there, but like how God is not, he has no determinations in any, that he's just this being, but it's almost like God is totally open. He's opening himself. He's constantly opening himself. He's constantly, the Trinity's obviously doing this, but in that sense that God's never locked into one framing. He's always ready to start anew in a new position. It's like he has no predetermined outcomes, where we are constantly predetermined and mediated through states that we immediately go into thinking about a certain person or any way, but that's because our ego has to have control. But if we're going to let go of that control and sacrifice, then that's that pouring out that. But we tend to be able to do that in loving situations much better, like you're saying. Even though we don't know that person, we're comfortable enough to open ourselves to not, and that's what love does to us, is like, and that's what the great thing is about a loved one that you've been with for so long, is that you're ready to see anew, you're ready to be new and be transformed almost in a way, in a new going through life. But
well, Sherry, I was thinking about,
and
what I was thinking about, Sherry, so what you're talking about the mystery of your husband and you to him and he to you and all that other stuff, right? And we saw here, when we heard how he set this up, is God is beyond all this stuff, but then he is in everything too. So he's that. But so think about this as it relates to the people you love in your life, in your personal relationships. The simultaneous negation of affirmation and negation means that God's transcendence eludes our very idea of transcendence. God transcends his own transcendence so that he may not be lost in abstract nothingness, but may give himself. The simultaneous overcoming of affirmation and negation already outlines the antinomy of personal existence. The more it is hidden, the more it is given. The more it is given, the more it is hidden. If I think about my personal relationships with people, Sherry, that's what it plays out like.
Yeah.
Right? Because, and why is it? Because they bear the image. They contain that within every person is the mystery of God too.
Yeah.
Right? Even though we have this particularity, and we're not the transcendent one beyond the transcendent one, there is that difference. But that within us is that paradox, that mystery. And if you can approach, because one of the things I'm trying to work on is like interrupt my wife when I think I know what she's going to say and I don't let her say it. And what I'm doing is I'm making a decision of what I think she's going to say as if I know her, right? And I know her thinking or where she's going to come out. And she finds that absolutely maddening, you know? And yet it's this thing that I've done my whole life, and I'm trying to work on that. But if I could approach my wife more as the mystery, like I'm approaching God in this mystery way, wouldn't that be so much better for our relationship?
Well, that's
just a quick.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
Oh, I just heard a statement in like a lot of couples counseling, and most psychologists say they know they're going to have a problem with the couple when, like, the couple is just they keep going over the same, playing out the same problems that they're always having. They never see an out. They're trapped in these problems, and they give the other no way out or a new way of being, transformed in that relationship of like, oh my God, I never knew you. I see, and listening, like there's a new way they could see them.
Yeah.
That's good, Andrew.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I hope I try to do with things like this is I'm trying to figure out, learn about myself. So then hopefully how I approach the world and how I approach my relationships and how I approach other human beings. I think this stuff only matters if it changes the way that I live and move and be,
Well, I think it's ultimately just seeking the image of God in everyone, right? Like that's what, and that's what I was trying to get at earlier, is that if God is in all creatures, then all creatures, and that is all of creation, are an attribute of his, right? And they're only going to give us, it's not information, it's what it is. It's like an embrace. It's like a new embrace every time you examine that thing to find God in it. It's like a kiss. That's what it's like.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things, and Paul put it on his Vanderclips, I was talking about it, and I get what Chris is saying. Like you have to point out things that are wrong, and he was using like a lot of different words. One of the things I'm trying to get past is, and I think 12-step stuff does this stuff real well, where this whole idea of God of your own understanding, and just basically if you still get on this seeking path that you're going to be informed, is we're having all this backbiting and infighting amongst ourselves as Christians, about all these definitions and all these things and all these approaches. And I've participated in that so much in my life, and I'm trying to get out of that mode of being. I think that's what Paul does really well. I think he's developing a spirit and giving people a chance to tell their stories. And, you know, he has his persuasions and his beliefs or whatever, but he's trying to give people a voice. And, you know, because I see how things are playing out for our friend, you know, Sam, who's running into issues with being excommunicated from all these Trinitarian churches, you know, and stuff, and what a problem that is. And, boy, if we could rise above some of these things. And I think some of that's why I really like this chapter, sure, because like it's the affirmation and the negation and the affirmation. It's you know, there's arguments whether apophaticism or cataphasticism and everything else. It's like, well, it's both, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but then, you know, we play in the playground of the particular. Yeah, transformation, that's right.
Yeah, that's the way to succinctly put what I was just trying to talk about there is I'm trying not to grasp information. I'm trying to be transformed.
Yeah. Well, if anybody watched this from the very beginning, they will have just seen the whole process of spinning a skein of wool.
Accomplishment. And you were at dropping nuggets of wisdom in the middle of that. That's like that's walking and chewing gum at the same time.
Yeah, I think, well, when I'm doing, my hands are busy, actually. It's when I do most of my thinking. I don't know if I hear everything that you're saying, though.
That's probably better.
But I am thinking. Yeah. Well, I'm going to sign off, Lance, but I'll check back in. If you're still here, I'll join again. I
think that's good. Andrew, you said you had to run too?
Yeah, I got to get going. So thanks, son.
It was nice to meet you, Andrew.
Nice to meet you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I think let's go. How close am I? I'm almost close to the end of the chapter. So I might just read the end of the chapter and close it out after that so we can stick a landing for people. Thanks. Hey, thanks for joining, Sherry. Thanks for everyone else who joined.
Yeah. I'll be listening. I'll listen to the end.
Okay. I've got, how many pages do I have? I have 2.5 pages. Heck, I'll just read it.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I can leave.
I was the administrator, so I launched it. So you'll be okay to leave.
The only button I've got here is end. And if I do that.
No, if you go to the bottom, it says leave studio.
Does it?
Mm-hmm. Somewhere it should say leave studio and not end broadcast.
Weird. There it is. Okay.
Thanks. All right. So we're just talking about the simultaneous negation of affirmation and negation. Let's go ahead and read this, and I'll read this to the end, and we'll close out the broadcast unless anybody else decides they want to jump in from the link. I'll start with that Dionysius the Areopagite, the mystery that is beyond God himself, the ineffable, that gives its name to everything, is complete affirmation, complete negation, beyond all affirmation and all negation. This simultaneous negation of affirmation and negation means that God's transcendence eludes our very idea of transcendence. God transcends his own transcendence, so that he may not be lost in abstract nothingness, but may give himself. The simultaneous overcoming of affirmation and negation already outlines the antinomy of personal existence. The more it is hidden, the more it is given. The more it is given, the more hidden it is. That is why the fathers also speak of God as inaccessible, of God beyond God. In terms of a springing forth, a creative and redemptive leap outside his essence, following the eternal movement of the divine energies, but also in order to communicate these to creatures by personal actions, because the living God is a God who acts. He is not being, but he contains it, and by his actions enables creatures to share in it. Here's a quote from Maximus the Confessor. When God, who is absolute fullness, brought creatures into existence. It was not done to fulfill any need, but so that his creatures should be happy to share his likeness, and so that he himself might rejoice in the joy of his creatures as they draw inexhaustibly upon the inexhaustible. A quote from Theophilus of Antioch. He is called God because he has built everything on its own foundations, and because he makes a leap. Leaping means giving life to the world. He is almighty. He contains everything. The heights of heaven, the depths of the abyss, the bounds of the earth are in his hands. God has always existed, and he always will exist. Or to put it better, God always exists. In fact, past and future express the fragments of duration as we know it, gliding naturally along. But he, God, is eternal existence. And this is the name that he gives himself when he reveals the future to Moses on the mountain. He actually contains in himself all being, which has had no beginning and will have no end. What I would call an ocean of being without limit and without end, beyond any notions of duration and nature that our intellect could form for itself. The intellect can evoke him only obscurely, not with any knowledge of his true nature, but by looking at what surrounds it. By assembling and interpreting the images in our mind, we can begin to reconstruct something approaching an idea of the capital T truth. He enlightens the higher part of our being, provided it has been purified, just as a sudden flash of lightning strikes our eyes. And that, in my opinion, is so that for as much as we have an understanding of him, he may draw us to himself. I was thinking at the end of We Agnostics in the Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says, when we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. And for as much as we do not understand him, he may excite our curiosity. This will awaken in our soul the longing to know him further. This longing will lay bare our soul. This nakedness will make us like God. When we have reached this state, God will convene with us as friends. If I may dare say so, God will be united with God's lower G gods and revealing himself to them, and will be known to the same extent as he is known. There's Sherry's know as you're known. Gregory Nazianzen. Back to Oliver Clement. These words are charged with the negative approach to God, with his silence. Referring to the ineffable, they speak of the presence and the actions of the capital O1, of whom a 19th century saint declared that he is a fire that inflames our entrails. These affirmations, perfected by negation, state that God is spirit, fire, light, life, love. Here one recognizes the very words and attitudes of Jesus. A quote from Maximus the Confessor. God is breath, for the breath of the wind is shared by all, goes everywhere. Nothing shuts it in. Nothing holds it prisoner. Another quote from Dionysius the Areopagite. The sacred theologians often describe the superessential essence in terms of fire. The fire can be experienced everywhere, so to speak. It illuminates everything whilst remaining distinct from everything. It shines with a total brilliance, and at the same time, its presence is secret, being unknown outside of the material that is making it visible. It is not possible to bear its brightness, nor to behold it face to face, but its power extends everywhere, and wherever it appears, it attracts everything. By means of this transmutation, it gives itself to anyone who approaches it, however distantly. It restores creatures to life with its quickening warmth. It enlightens them, but in itself it remains pure and unabsorbed. It is active, powerful, everywhere present, and invisible. Neglected, it seems as if it did not exist. But as a result of the friction, which is a kind of prayer, it suddenly appears, leaps up, and spreads all around. One could find more than one other property of fire that would be applicable as a visible image to the operations of the divine capital P principle. A quote from Evagrius of Pontus. Just as light, which enables us to see each object, does not need any other light to be visible itself, so God, who enables us to see everything, does not need a light by which we might be able to see him, because he is light by his very essence. And here we've got a quote from another quote by Dionysius the Areopagite. We must now praise that perpetual life from which all life proceeds, and by means of which every living thing, according to its own particular capacity, receives life. Whether you are speaking of the life of the spirit, or of reason, or of the senses, and what feeds it and makes it grow, or of any other kind of life that can possibly be, it is thanks to the capital L life that transcends all life that it lives and communicates life. Indeed, it is not enough to say that this capital L life is alive. It is the very principle of life and its sole source. It is that which perfects and differentiates all life, and its praises should be sung by all life. Bestower of life and more than life. It deserves to be honored with every name that human beings can apply to this inexpressible capital L life. Oh, Nate's going to love this. From St. John Climacus, from the Ladder of Divine Ascent. God is love. Whoever sought to define him would be like a blind person trying to count the grains of sand on the seashore. So that was chapter 2 out of the Roots of Christian Mysticism, God Hidden and Universal. So thank everyone for tuning in today. We'll be back. I want to thank everyone who joined. And if you guys like this stuff, maybe leave some comments. Maybe we'll continue kind of exploring some of these chapters in the Roots of Christian Mysticism. God bless all.